Hi, I'm Debbie Johnson, your host of Beauty Talent Talk, where our mission is to inspire, share expert insights, and support the ongoing evolution of growth in the beauty community. So today we have Danielle Cobo, career strategist and keynote speaker, as our guest. Danielle, thanks for being here today.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Kirsty, our moderator.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for having me. And as always, we're really lucky to have Danielle here today. So if you do have any questions or anything that you want to bring up or get clarification on, please pop them in the comments and I'll make sure to bring them up to the panel.
So we acknowledge it's a difficult job market right now. We see it, I see it daily. I've had a lot of conversations with Danielle about it. And the show today is to really provide some essential tips to help increase the opportunities coming from resume submissions. There's so much feedback that I receive on resumes being submitted, not hearing anything back, or getting a Dear Jane letter, but really not getting the opportunities per hiring managers and interviews. So that's going to be the topic, and we're going to leverage Danielle's expertise to help you elevate your resumes, LinkedIn profiles to create more job opportunities through interviews. So Danielle, let's first talk about the current job market. I'd love to get your perspective on the job market and get some feedback on what are some of the clients and candidates that you're working with. What are they facing?
Well, it's a mixed job market, which is really interesting. There's a lot of companies that are going through expansions, and then there's also some larger companies recently that just went through layoffs. So it's a mixed market right now when it comes to the job. I would say that one of the biggest challenges that job seekers are facing, and you alluded to this a little bit, is they're spending so much time applying to jobs online. They're taking the time to fill out the application, to submit their resume online, and then they're either getting crickets or they're getting that automated generated response saying, we've selected another candidate. And it's frustrating and it's very discouraging, and it really does affect the confidence level when you are a very successful salesperson and you're looking for a job, but you keep getting rejected and rejected and rejected. And so that's oftentimes the challenge that I'm seeing in the job market. The other one is, and this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine because I used to be a hiring manager, so I believe there's no excuse for this, but for individuals that go on interviews and then get ghosted by the hiring manager. That to me, there's no excuse for that. And it is a pet peeve of mine. And it's so discouraging when people spend the time to prepare for an interview, to go and spend the time to go on the interview, and then to be ghosted by the hiring manager.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, the beauty community is so small. And to have that as the final experience for a candidate, it's very unfortunate. And I have heard feedback. I've seen it come back, even of the hiring managers at a different company. So just to professionally send an email to close the loop out of professional respect, I think it's so vital in the process. So I want to switch gears, and I'd love to kind of talk through just the starting of an interview process. And when candidates are submitting the resumes, what does that process look like? Because the volume of resumes that are being received through LinkedIn posts is 3 to 5x that I'm hearing across a lot of brands and hiring managers. And what does that process look like, Danielle?
Yeah, so I'll share from my experience of being a hiring manager, where I was a hiring manager for a very respectful company in the aesthetic market, where on average, we would get a report and it would show us about how many applications we would receive per job posting. So this is about 5 years ago, so it's different. It's much higher now. Yeah. But on average, we would get about 300 to 350 applications per job posting. Mm-hmm. And then what would happen is those applications would go through what's called the Applicant Tracking System, also known as the ATS system. And it would be filtered. It would go through and filter the resumes. So if the job description specifically says you need 5 years outside sales experience, but you don't have 5-year outside sales experience when you're clicking the certain boxes, or it doesn't show it on your resume may get filtered out. And then what happened is for the company that I worked with, is it would go then to our internal talent acquisition team. Our internal talent acquisition team would then look at the resumes that were filtered through the applicant tracking system. And then on average, they would send me as the hiring manager 5 to 7 resumes. And so even though there's over 350 applications, I'm only getting a handful of resumes. And so oftentimes you'll hear, yeah, it's very seldom does your resume actually get viewed by the human eyes. And that is the reason why, is because of the applicant tracking system. And so it can be very discouraging when you know that you have the skill sets and you know that you could be a quality candidate for that role, but if your resume isn't optimized for the applicant tracking system and doesn't have the right information for it, it may never even get into the hiring manager's hands.
Absolutely. And there goes the feedback of so little candidates actually getting an interview or getting to speak with the hiring manager. So let's talk about optimization. What is the advice that you have to help candidates optimize their resume?
Great question. So first, understand the job description and the role. So working in the aesthetic industry, the skill sets that a hiring manager or the applicant tracking system is looking for is very different depending on the role. So if you're going to be selling capital equipment, there's different skill sets that they're going to be looking for in a capital equipment role, like prospecting and cold calling and negotiations, then there would be a consumable type role where you're more focused on marketing and pull through strategy. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important when you're working on your resume is first, a lot of times when I will work with a job seeker, is first get super clear on the different types of roles that you want to pursue. Look at the job descriptions and then ensure that your resume is highlighting the specific transferable skills that you have to match that job description. And sometimes that does require different resumes. If I have leadership experience, but I'm applying for an individual contributor role, I'm going to highlight more of my individual contributor type success than I would my leadership success. And so that's really important when you're submitting your application, is that you're submitting the resume that aligns with the types of roles that you're applying to.
Yeah, absolutely. One area that we talked about and we're very aligned on is quantifiable achievements, really laying out. Let's talk about that topic.
Very much so. I mean, it always surprises me. I'll see some resumes where all it is quantifiable, President's Club, and it just lists all the awards that they've won, but not the actual steps they've taken to achieve those roles. So I want to understand what were the steps they took to achieve those roles. Sure. And then there's other resumes where there's no metrics. The resume looks like it's just a list of roles and responsibilities and more of a job description. Yes. And so it's extremely important that you understand what hiring managers are looking for. Specifically in sales, I'm looking for somebody, I want to look for year-over-year growth, quarter-over-quarter growth. I want to look at your attainment. How did you rank in comparison to your peers in the nation? So it's really important that whether you're looking for a position or not, always keep track of the metrics in your position and ensure that you're updating your resume on a consistent basis with those metrics.
Absolutely. And I would say in today's job market and where companies are being very cost conscious of spend, when you have the achievements of saving a company money, when if you're a supply chain expert and you have negotiated the vendors on a global basis, you did a consolidation, you saved the company $1 million, that needs to be showcased on the resume. Whether you're adding revenue, you're saving revenue, it needs to be highlighted. I think that is really key. And I also want to talk about some of the tools. We look at AI, we look at ChatGPT. I know it's become very popular. I recently was having a discussion with a candidate, and she was saying that she's had a lot of resumes submitted. She's had no responses. Someone gave her advice to take one of the job postings and plug it into ChatGPT, which then gave her a series of keywords that she then plugged into her resume. And it actually did lead to a phone interview, and she got a result. So she found it very effective. And I know, Danielle, there's certain ways to use ChatGPT that we recommend and not having it necessarily write your entire resume. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, ChatGPT can be a very valuable resource when it comes to writing a resume. My watch out with it is I can often tell if somebody's not a resume writer and a candidate just uses ChatGPT to write their resume. I can often tell because there's a lot of filler words. There's a lot of words that can be taken out. It's not concise. It still doesn't have the metrics. Or what happens is they're so focused in on, does my resume match the job description? But here's the challenge. If the job description is outdated and it's not really aligned with the current role and the where it's at today. So the company that I worked for, the job description had been the same job description for 5+ years. But if you don't know what that role is like and what somebody is doing, working for it, then you might just be having ChatGPT making a resume based off of an old job description. And there's a lot of job descriptions out there that I look at right now that are either outdated or they're vague, but it just happens to be that I know the company, I know the role. So I know specifically what the hiring manager is looking for that particular role and aesthetic. So when you are looking at a resume, it's ensuring that you have the right information, invest in a resume writer, invest in somebody that knows the aesthetic market if that's going to be the market you're going to be going into.
Or just have the keywords in any category or channel or market that you're in. And when you talk about old job descriptions or generic job descriptions, what's the advice for candidates to be able to overcome that challenge? Because there's so much, I think that there's not a lot of time sometimes putting job descriptions. It's just urgent, let's post it, let's see what we can get. And that doesn't help candidates that are, often they want a job, but they also want the right job.
Yeah. Well, and this kind of goes into, eventually we can get into the conversation about job search strategy, but there's a lot of organizations where they will offer an internal referral bonus for referring somebody into the company if there's a job posting. So reaching out to people that work for the company and saying, hey, I'm really interested in this position. I know that your time is busy. Can I maybe just ask you a couple questions about the role to see if it's a good fit and possibly if I might be a good member to join your team? Because maybe you're talking about somebody that you might potentially work with. And so you want to see, would I be a value add to your team? And they can provide a lot of perspective way beyond the job description that could also add value when it comes to crafting your resume.
Absolutely. And they're reaching out to someone at the company, a coworker, a potential coworker, right? A cross-functional team member. Is there a do or don't perspective when you talk about that? Because I think most people would feel uncomfortable in kind of a cold email where they may feel like that would take away the opportunity, or maybe they'll be turned off. What's your perspective there?
First, be mindful that they're busy. So a lot of times people get really frustrated that I've reached out to people that work for the company and no one's responding. Yeah. Well, first, I always assume positive intent. Let's assume that maybe they're not on LinkedIn all the time because they're not actively looking for a job. They're also, in working. And so responding to somebody on LinkedIn may not be their top priority. So give the person some grace, while also there's an opportunity to follow up as well. Hey, I know, even just saying right off the bat, I know you're probably busy. If you would be willing, I've always appreciated the people that have helped me before, and I'm now doing it as well, to just talk about the role and see if I might be a value add to your team.
Absolutely. And I think a follow-up, I do a lot of follow-up in my job as I work with candidates and clients, and they are very busy. And it's acknowledging, I know you're very busy. However, like a couple minutes, whatever the scenario is, or a gentle, kind nudge. It's all about how you position it and word you use. Now, when we talk about applying to jobs on LinkedIn, there's other avenues to pursue your job strategy and have more of a proactive approach. Let's talk about that.
Yes, there is, it is requirement for organizations, for a lot of organizations, that you do apply to a job online if they only use internal acquisition team. Now, there's also value in reaching out to people that work for the organization, reaching out to the hiring managers directly on LinkedIn and forwarding your resume to them. Also, recruiters are like the best valuable resource that is out there, because there are a lot of companies, especially startup companies, that don't have an internal acquisition team and they rely heavily on recruiters. And sometimes startup companies don't actually post their jobs online because they don't want their competitors to know where they're placing certain positions. And so I think working with recruiters, and this is a mutual relationship. You want to come in as a value add to this recruiter and saying, here's the value that I'm going to bring to your client and how I'm going to be a good representation of you, recruiter X, whoever that is. Because a lot of people go to recruiters and they'll say, I just need help getting a job, get me a job. It's like, well, wait a minute. If I'm a recruiter, and I'm not, but this is also my reputation. I want to make sure that I'm putting my best foot forward to bringing quality clients to my client. And so, yeah, I definitely work with recruiters. Definitely something you want to do. Reach out to the hiring managers on LinkedIn would also be part of that job search strategy.
Yeah, I think being transparent with the recruiter, well, first, I think it starts with knowing your expertise, your impact, and really being able to tell your own personal, what I call brand story. I think that's number one. And number two is driving the conversation. When I speak with candidates, I want to understand what is the right job profile? What are the goals that we're looking to achieve professionally? Where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? And really having those candid conversations, I think, is so key to develop that partnership and to have the right opportunities being presented to you.
100%.
Now, let's talk about...
Quickly, Debbie, before we move on, we've had some good questions, and I feel like this might be a good time to sort of bring them up. And if anybody has any more, please feel free. So Stephen has asked, I know many recent graduates and beginners trying to enter the market. How would you recommend that they organize their resume to qualify for positions? How does future potential outweigh experience?
Good question. So those that are entering their recent graduates, is there any work experience that they can highlight over the years? Is there any experience that they can highlight? So I know a lot of people maybe did work while they were in college, or they were part of a sorority where they held a certain position in the sorority or the fraternity, or did they do any volunteer work? We just want to highlight some sort of experience that translates to the role. Do they have an internship that they can add to that experience from as well? But also being realistic in the positions that you're applying to. So for a lot of the people that I work with are in sales. And so, a lot of times I'll say, if you're looking for a sales position and you're looking to get into aesthetic sales specifically, they're going to ask for, a lot of companies will ask for 5 years outside sales experience, but you can get in with probably 2 or 3, but they're going to be looking for outside B2B sales. So if your goal is to work in sales, then make sure you've got some sort of outside B2B sales and strive for that and really perform well in that role so that you have some metrics to include on your resume.
I'll add to that real quick, because I do find I have nieces and nephews that have recently graduated, and I've been working very closely with them to find opportunities, and showcasing some of the courses they've done, the projects they've done can also be relevant depending on, if you're in the beauty community and you've taken courses specifically for classes, those are great opportunities to really showcase that, maybe in your achievements, highlighting your GPA, whatever relevant. If it's economic classes, there's different scenarios that apply into finance roles. So I think it's transferable as long as it's being highlighted, and it should be one-page resume. I think as a college grad, rule of thumb with a resume is you should not have longer than a one-page resume when you're under 7 years of experience.
Amazing. That leads very nicely, actually, Debbie. It's almost like we planned this into our next question, which somebody said, I've always heard to keep a resume to 1 page, but my experience of 25 years seems relevant and has gotten to where it feels like 1 page is just not doing justice to the scope and metrics that I've accomplished. What's the prevailing thought to going onto a 2nd page these days, particularly with these AI filters? It seems like getting those keywords is important. So Danielle, I'm going to come to you first on this one.
As long as the information is relevant to the position that you are applying to, then I've seen 3-page resumes. To me, that whole philosophy, it needs to be under 1 page. If you've got 15 plus years of experience and you're applying, let's say, for example, you're applying for a leadership role and you've been in sales and you've had capital equipment experience, you've had a consumable experience, you've had skincare experience, and you're applying for a leadership position, you want to highlight all of that. That's very valuable. Now, where I do see some people where I'll be working with them and I'll say, okay, this particular experience that you've had, while it is part of your work history, it's really not relevant to the role that you're applying to, and it's over 10 years old. And if we keep it on your resume, it's taking away from your more relevant experience. So let's go ahead and take that off. So ensuring that any experience that you have on your resume, that tells the story of the relevancy on how this particular experience you had translates to the roles that you're applying to.
Absolutely. And what's your take, Danielle, on paragraph versus bullet points?
Ooh, okay. So I've read a statistic that, and this is, and I could agree with this because I was the same way, that the average hiring manager only spends about 5 to 7 seconds actually looking at a resume. So there is an area where you put a paragraph, which is like right under the job description or the job that you've held, and there's certain keywords you want to put in there. But bullet points, specifically if there's bullet points when it comes to the core competencies and the results, and then bullet point specific awards and recognition. So if you won President's Club, you want that to be like on its own line, because that is something that you really want to highlight. You don't want it to be to the point where the hiring manager is having to like read your entire resume to look for certain key metrics, because most hiring managers are not doing that. We receive so many applications, and we're doing that on top of our day-to-day responsibility as a manager. I often say too that a vacancy is the most stressful time for a hiring manager, because not only are we doing our day-to-day of the manager, but we're also helping cover the vacancy of that particular role. So we have added work on us. Plus we're trying to look at resumes and do interviews. And so you really want your resume to be brief, to the point, concise, and highlighting all of your accomplishments and transferable skills. So to answer your question, bullet points are valuable.
Amazing. We have had quite a few other questions, but Danielle's very gracefully said that she'll stick around a bit longer at the end. So we will come back and answer them, I promise. But Debbie, I think we should kind of continue on with your questions, then we'll come back to the audience's questions in a bit.
Okay, so let's dive into LinkedIn and the importance that LinkedIn is playing into a candidate's profile and how that relates to their job search.
LinkedIn is your digital resume. So I will see a lot of job seekers spend so much time on their resume. And is your resume valuable? Absolutely. Think of your LinkedIn profile as an extension of your resume. It is the digital resume that you currently have now. And it's so important too, and Debbie, you probably know more than anybody on this because you are a recruiter, but a lot of recruiters use a program called LinkedIn Recruiter. And so they'll go into LinkedIn Recruiter and they'll say, I'm looking for somebody in this particular geography with this particular skill sets, and there's some metrics that they're going to be looking for. You want your LinkedIn profile to come up top as one of the top people to reach out to. Whether you're looking for a job or not, I always say that invest the time in your LinkedIn profile, because if you invest the time in building out a comprehensive LinkedIn profile, doors will open up for you. When I got into aesthetics, I actually wasn't looking for a job. I had been with my company for 5 years and had earned 4 consecutive President's Club awards. I was doing great. But a recruiter reached out to me because I had invested the time in my LinkedIn profile, and that's what brought me into aesthetics. So it is one of the most valuable tools that you can have in your career, is to invest the time in your LinkedIn profile.
And let's talk through some of the basic details. When it comes to the photo, when it comes to the background banner, when it comes to titles, all of those do play into getting noticed and having a recruiter or hiring manager reach out.
Okay, so the 2 most important spots on your LinkedIn profile is your photo. Your photo should not be you at a wedding and it's cropped out you. It should not look like it belongs on Tinder. Seen some of those. It shouldn't be, I know there's a lot of people that are doing AI generated, but it doesn't come across as authentic. So please stay away from the AI generated ones. It really should be a professional photo with personality too. It doesn't need to be stuffy, with some personality, but a professional photo. This is not a Facebook page. This is your digital resume. So have a professional photo on there. Then the second spot is your headline. Your headline, you can have up to 220 characters. And your headline, automatically defaults to the most recent position that you've been in. However, that's the prime real estate to specifically say what your skill sets are, the industry that you work in, how many years of experience you've had, how many President's Clubs awards. The headline is very important. Then your background cover photo, having a customized background cover photo can be very eye-catching.
Sure.
Please do not, and I'm going to say, I'm not going to call people out, but please do not put a picture of a beach scene, because as a hiring manager, I look at that and I go, wow, you're looking for a job, but you much rather be at the beach. That is not the time or place for that. Or pictures of you and your animals as much as you love your fur babies, or pictures of family. I mean, I love pictures of family, but it's just not the spot to be on your LinkedIn profile. So having a professional background cover photo, your about section, you can have 2,600 characters as your about section. And so having that is a great place to tell your career story, your personality, what it's like, what are your values, what are some of your accomplishments, what is it like working with you, what's the value you bring to an organization. And then your experience section is going to mirror a lot of what your resume is going to look like. And then your skills section, you can have up to 100 skills, but you want to ensure that those skill sets are going to be the searchable skill sets for the jobs that you're applying to. So a lot of times when I work with people, we go step by step, every single section of the LinkedIn profile to build out a comprehensive LinkedIn profile.
And I find in a lot of cases, your LinkedIn profile will act and probably be a more viable path for getting hiring managers to reach out and getting interviews than just submitting resumes alone. What are your thoughts on that, Danielle?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. Because oftentimes, I'll say this example. I had one candidate reach out to me when I was a hiring manager, and she found me on LinkedIn. She was interested in working for the company that I was with. I didn't have the position available at that time. However, the person that was in the role at that time was on a career track for a promotion. So a year later, when that position opened up, who was the first person that I called? The person that emailed me her resume that I saved on my computer specifically for that territory. So yes, LinkedIn is such a valuable tool for networking directly with the people that work for the organization. Most jobs are found through networking. Very rarely are people actually having success applying to jobs online.
Yeah, exactly. Networking and all these vehicles are great methods. So I'd like to end the conversation with this question. So Danielle, when you were a hiring manager, tell me about the attributes that you look for when interviewing candidates.
Oh, okay. So I don't know if every manager is like this, but I actually did not always look for industry experience. I looked at three areas. So one, I looked at what were the immediate needs, because coming from sales, I know you support a lot of different roles, but I looked at what were the immediate needs of that territory, or if it's like a marketing role, that specific role. So what were the immediate needs? For me, it was, if it was an emerging territory, I can take a little bit more of a risk on hiring somebody that was a little bit greener than a territory that had a lot of key opinion leaders. I might need somebody that's a little bit more established in their sales career for that particular territory. So what are the needs of the immediate team or role? Then what were the needs of my team? So each person on my team brought a different skill set to the overall team. So I had some people that were great in marketing, some people that had an aesthetics, like worked in an office, and so they had the inner office understanding of what it was like that was a value add. Or I had some people that had an esthetician background. And so I looked at what were the immediate needs of my team. And then also the third one was time. For me, would I enjoy spending 8 hours in the car with this person on a field ride along? That was important too. So a lot of times it wasn't necessarily, did this person have industry experience? While that was valuable, I looked at, did this person have transferable skills? Because I can teach you products, I can teach you sales processes, but for me in sales, I can't teach you to wake up every single morning and hit the ground running and have the same motivation, enthusiasm to hit your number every single quarter after quarter.
Sure.
So I looked more for characteristics and transferable skills than I did necessarily, you had to have 5 years experience in the industry.
Sure. Very helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
Amazing. Okay, so in a second, we've got quite a few questions. Do keep them coming if you got them. In a second, we're gonna come to those and then Danielle's top tip. But before then, Debbie, I think now's a good time to tell everybody what the next show is in 2 weeks time, in a month's time.
Yep. So we're excited for our next topic. So we're going to focus on a culture first leadership, building trust, retention, sponsorship. And our guest speaker is going to be Ruben Carranza. So he is the CEO of Vance, and it's a parent company to Amika and other beauty brands. And he's going to really discuss his journey when he started at Amika. He made some very tough decisions, but he's created a very unique culture in a remote work environment, fully remote. And I think that that's been a challenge for a lot of companies if they are remote, keeping the connection, keeping high productivity, which he's done, and a very high retention, and really specifically focusing on culture. There's so much discussion around company culture, and I do find a lot of companies have a company culture or talk about it, but it's not really thread throughout the organization. And when you talk to employees, because I speak with employees on a daily basis, and I ask sometimes about, what do you define as company culture, or how do you, how would you explain the culture of your company now? A lot of them will say, I don't feel like we have a culture, or I don't really know. And so I think there's an opportunity to improve and further define. And Ruben has done this and created really best in class culture where people are so happy. His retention rate speaks volumes. So we're excited about that next month. And that's going to be Thursday, June 26th at 12 o'clock. Tune in.
It's going to be a very good one. Right, Danielle, we have a lot of questions for you, so I think you're kind of in the zone. So first question I'm going to bring up is, somebody's asked if they are currently in a smaller market, in this case Jacksonville, and want to relocate for another opportunity, then what should they put as their current location on their LinkedIn profile? They've been told that they should leave the location blank, but they want to make sure that they're captured by recruiters that perform geographic searches on LinkedIn.
Okay, great question. And interesting that Jacksonville is a smaller market, because that was part of my region and it was a great market. So Jacksonville, I would say, so if you already know the area that you're going to be relocating to, then I would actually put that city as the area. Now, one thing that I do is too, if you live in a small suburb of a major metropolitan city, but you know that most of the roles are for that metropolitan city, I would put that major metropolitan city as the city for where you are. Plus also too, safety wise, it's always good if you don't put the actual little city that you work in or that you live in. So I would say if you already know the area that you're going to be relocating to, put that city on there, because I will say, and I can say this because I'm not actually working for a company right now, there is going to be some skepticism on whether they're going to hire you if you're not actually living in that geography. Yeah. There's just a reality to it.
Yeah, or they consider that they're going to have to pay for relocation cost, and if that's not in the budget, they're just not going to go that direction. So it does kind of hinder you before you get started.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Hopefully that's answered your question. I have had a couple of people ask this, and I'll very quickly answer. So people are asking if there's a replay or if they can watch the recording. Yes, you can. It will be in the same place as you currently are, or it is also available on our YouTube channel, which I will put a link for once this is finished. So I will do that later. Okay, so next question. Stacey's asked, when you were a hiring manager, did you feel the company would rather have you hire someone that went through the ATS, an internal system, or somebody who contacted you or was referred to you?
Ooh, okay. So confession here. I don't know if I actually hired somebody that was sent to me from the internal acquisition team. Most of the people that I hired. So here's one example. This is a great example too. So one person applied online, did not get through the applicant tracking system because our company required 5 years outside sales experience. However, this individual only had 2 years outside sales experience. However, she was my diamond. And the reason why I call her the diamond, was because even though she only had 2 years outside sales experience, she was a former nurse for the #1 plastic surgery practice in the territory that she was applying to. So she had such a unique background, and I didn't have somebody that had that clinical background on my team. And so she didn't make it through the applicant tracking system. She actually got a hold of one of the people that worked for the organization, and then resume got filtered to me that way. So I would say I don't even know if I've really hired anybody from what the internal talent acquisition team sent me, majority of the people that I hired over the 7 years that I worked for this particular company was either they reached out to me on LinkedIn, or I was one of those like hiring managers that actually reached out to people on LinkedIn if there were certain people I wanted to recruit from, or they were referred to me by somebody internally within our organization.
Perfect.
Great advice and just good avenues for other candidates to follow.
Amazing. And that sort of kind of links to this question, which somebody's asked, which I think you kind of answered. Somebody said they've been tailoring their resume with keywords from the job description, but keep getting an automated rejection, not even an interview. What can they do next? So I'm assuming going directly perhaps to the hiring managers is a way forward there.
That could be one of the avenues. However, without really looking at their resume, it would be hard to say if that's the next avenue, because there's some, it's not always just, I've seen some resumes that are just very heavy keyword focused, but they don't have the metrics. And so while there's a lot of people out there and they hear this information of like, I got to make this sure my resume is keyword focused, you need to know what the keywords are. You need to know how to lay out the resume. So when we're looking at a resume, I want it to be aesthetically pleasing, number one. So if I have 20 resumes on my desk, what's going to be so aesthetically pleasing about that resume that it's going to pop up and I'm going to want to pick that one up first? No, that does not mean that your picture's on there, because picture on a resume does not belong on a resume, but it needs to be aesthetically pleasing. It needs to have the right information, not just keywords, but specifically what are the transferable skills that you have that are translating specifically to the role that you're applying to. And again, if you're applying to different types of roles, you might have different resumes for that. And then also, does it include metrics? So I can't, without seeing somebody's resume, really say if that is the next step. It might be, hey, let's really refine your resume first, and then let's work on the job search strategy, which is more focused on networking than it is actually applying to jobs online.
Amazing. Thank you very much. This individual has asked, how can experienced or senior level marketing managers stand out or find full-time permanent roles where their experience is desired in today's market, where companies are cutting and offering more temp or contract roles?
So it sounds like they're finding a lot of companies that are doing more of the temp and the contract roles than they are necessarily the full-time level marketing. But so this is kind of where I'm looking at this question, and I'm seeing if they're applying to senior level marketing positions, I don't often see companies hiring temp or contract roles for senior level marketing positions. I would first look at what are the types of companies that you're applying to, because if you're looking at the companies that are like, you know, the major players in aesthetics, they're not looking for temps or contracts. You may be finding that in some of these smaller startup companies that are out there. I don't know if Debbie, if you want to add anything to that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been actively supporting marketing brand searches. I mean, digital, having a digital first marketing skill set is going to be key. And making sure that you're able to highlight, if you're a brand marketer, what are you doing to impact customer loyalty, brand awareness, engagement? I mean, I think all of the traditional and non-traditional methods that make marketers successful should be highlighted on resume. I mean, yes, we are seeing an increase in these fractional type roles. And I do think for smaller startup brands, as Danielle mentioned, I mean, they are not looking to bring on that overhead in some scenarios if they don't have investment. So they're being more cost effective, and that's a filler. That may be the scenario. But I do think how the resume and how you've quantified your achievements, and as a marketer, what have you done to help that brand grow from a consumer basis? How has it grown from a channel diversification basis? We know omni-channel has been one of the leading strategies for brands growing. So I would focus more on keywords. And if you don't have those skills, then partner with other professionals, get mentors, go online and do some courses, whatever you can do to speak to the topic and continue to develop and evolve. Evolution and investing in growth when you're not working is really what sets professionals apart, and it gives you something to talk about now. And I think it also stimulates confidence. And if you're not confident in what you can bring to the table, and this job market is tough. So if you're getting rejected, you're not hearing from anybody, your confidence gets knocked. So you've got to figure out ways to make sure that you maintain your confidence.
Amazing. Hopefully that's answered your question.
Oh, I think we lost Kirsty for a second. So I am going to work on wrapping this up. And if there are other questions that we have not been able to engage and answer, what I'm going to do, and myself, Danielle, will answer and add some comments on LinkedIn from the conversation. We really enjoyed this discussion today. Danielle, thank you so much for joining. And if anyone wants to get in contact with you directly, what's the best method?
Find me on LinkedIn. Danielle Cobo is the easiest way. I'm on LinkedIn every single day. So
fantastic. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Take care.